Hey guys! The graphic novel that I've chosen to analyze is Wytches, written by Scott Snyder, who has written for Batman, American Vampire, and Swamp Thing, and illustrated by Jock, also known as Mark Simpson, who's illustrated for Batman and Wolverine. Wytches was published by Image Comics. It was a 6-issue limited series released October 2014 through March 2015. The 6 issues were put together to create a Volume 1 compilation graphic novel that's 191 pages. I wasn't really sure how to count the acts since this is a compilation graphic novel. I could have done the acts comic by comic, but since it's a volume, I decided to do the acts based as if it were one whole graphic novel. That being said, Act 1 ends on page 29, which is essentially toward the end of the first comic. By here, we're aware that our protagonist that we're following is Charlie Rooks, a father who has taken his wife Lucy and his daughter Sailor and moved far from their town after suspicions of Sailor causing the disappearance of her bully Annie. Her goal is to keep his daughter safe from their past. Page 32 is the start of Act 2, since I would say this is where the inciting incident begins. Sailor starts to see things, Annie specifically outside her window calling her name. This is where we realize that even though they moved away, something awful has followed them. The conflict in Act 2 definitely supports Charlie's goal in wanting to protect Sailor from her past. Some of the first events to happen are the creatures individually coming for the family. Something crawls toward Lucy when she's working as a nurse. Sailor and her Uncle Reggie are in the woods and have to face multiple inhuman creatures. A lady attacks Charlie while he's home alone. She actually eventually tells him that the witches are after Sailor and that she's been pledged, which means she was really trying to help in the end. After this, Sailor goes missing, and Charlie has to figure out where she is before it's too late. He's given something to hide himself from the witches by Clara, which is the woman that attacked him, so he won't forget about Sailor. Charlie then has to deal with finding Sailor after everyone has seemingly forgotten about her. Even Lucy doesn't remember them having a daughter. The only ones who haven't forgotten about Sailor are the people that work with the witches for wishes in return, and they're no help to him either. But after getting one of the people helping the witches to find where Sailor's been, Charlie goes into the depth of the trees to save his daughter, which is where Act 3 starts, on page 131. Charlie finds Sailor and escapes from the witches. They get home only to find out that everyone in the town is against them. Lucy was pretending to forget about Sailor to help make Charlie forget about her. Lucy's actually the one that pledged Sailor in order for the witches to leave them alone, and her and Charlie could start again. She does say in the comics that she tried to pledge someone else, which is actually Annie, the girl that people thought Sailor was the cause of going missing. So it was actually Lucy that caused it, which caused them to move in the end. It seems as though Charlie's about to give in to Lucy's idea of starting over, but he actually sacrifices himself in order to save Sailor. Sailor escapes, spilling a liquid laced with pledge on everyone, killing them all. This comic does fit the act model that we discussed in class. Act 1 and Act 3 both are only about 32 pages each, leaving Act 2 to take a majority of the story with 127 pages. The story does have a solid story arc. We're introduced to Charlie, our protagonist, well into the beginning of the story, and his goal is very clear. Everything that happens in the middle of the story is directly conflicting his goal, which is trying to save Sailor, his daughter. I think although some people might not have liked the ending, I loved it. Bittersweet endings are my favorite, and I think that if they had ended it any other way than Sailor surviving because of her father's sacrifice, it would have ruined the entire point of the story, which is the father risking everything for his daughter that he never used to be there for. This goes for character arcs as well, since both Charlie and Sailor have one. Charlie goes from being an absent alcoholic father to someone who wants to be there for his family. Sailor also goes from a character who lets her anxiety and panic disorders get the better of her to someone that finds the strength within herself to last as long as she did alone with the witches. Wytches does not make use of the page-by-page mini-comic, or page as a mini-comic. Almost every page is a lead into the other and doesn't really have their own full story on a single page. Some of the pages are also pretty hard to follow sometimes because of the art. At times, the text layout on the page would confuse me on who would be speaking and where my eyes were supposed to travel next. But with that being said, the transitions are absolutely beautiful. I noticed that Wytches used a lot of scene-to-scene transitions throughout the entire graphic novel. We were taken back and forth between the present and the past events that correlated with what was happening in the present. I thought it was used effectively and wisely. It also added an emotional element especially at the end, where Charlie sacrifices himself for Sailor, and the last panel, or one of the last panels, is in the past of him telling Sailor that she's his hero. I wouldn't recommend it to all of my classmates. I have a pretty good idea of what each person likes, and it's not this. I think out of all the students in the class, I would recommend it to maybe 2 or 3. All of the other classmates are into fantasy, sci-fi, or kind of slices of life stories, and this really isn't for anyone not interested in the horror genre. I would, however, recommend it to a few of my friends. Although my friends don't really read comics, I think the atmospheric horror that Wytches emits is right up their alley, and would be a good start for someone into horror but not into comics who wants to get into comics. Fun fact, Scott Snyder tweeted in 2016 about starting Volume 2 of the series, but has said nothing about the series since. The rights for a film adaptation were bought in 2014 by Plan B Entertainment, which is a company owned by Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston. The company has helped produce movies such as Departed, 12 Years a Slave, and World War Z, and they're also working on World War Z too. Again, though, nothing has been said or brought up recently about the movie, but horror fans on Twitter are hoping that it's in the works with the company. But that's Witches, and hopefully you guys check it out, and if you don't, well, then hopefully you guys will. Okay, that's it.